Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Fantasy Film Ball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt, and welcome back to part 2 of what I'm looking forward to at the Cannes Film Festival this year. If you haven't seen part 1, we cover the almost entirety of the official selection, meaning the competition, the out of competition, the un certain regard categories, and all other official selected films. But Cannes is a very unique festival in that it is not just the official selection, there are multiple parallel festivals that run in tandem with Cannes, those being Directors Fortnight, Critics Week, and Acid. So we'll be talking about all of those lineups throughout this video, as well as the late additions to the main selection. This video is acting as a bit of a personal watch list for me. I'm going to be only talking about the films that are piquing my interest from a distance. There will 1000% be a large handful of films that I don't talk about in this video or the previous video that end up being really special. So while this should be sort of a guideline of what's interesting me, there's going to be a lot that I don't talk about that ends up being really good. So with that said, if there's something that I don't mention here or in the first video that you're really interested in seeing, let me know in the comments. And last thing before we get into the video, we have a coffee link. You can scan the QR code or go into our description. We are attending the Cannes Film Festival again this year, and we would really appreciate your donations in order to help us bring you the best coverage of the festival possible this year and in future years. Now, with that said, let's get right into this video. Starting off with the late additions to the official selection of the festival. Now, films can be added late for many reasons, but usually these are last-minute submissions or films that the festival was previously unsure would be ready in time for the final deadline. Last year, this is where some of my favorite films of the festival showed up. The Seed of the Sacred Fig was announced as a late selection, as well as Flow. And famously, in 2019, there was a late selection, and then Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was announced even later because they were rushing to finish to the very last minute. And that brings me to the first film here, because in the competition category, so far 2 films have been added late, competing for the Palme d'Or. But rumors have stated that there is a very late possible third film that will likely be added as soon as it passes state censorship, which is Bi Gan's Resurrection. Inside word is that Chinese director Bi Gan finished filming Resurrection just a couple of weeks ago, but he has been rushing to get a cut into Cannes. He's been editing the film as they've been in production, and he uses a lot of long takes, so it's pretty believable that he could have finished filming 2 weeks ago and have it ready for Cannes. The second thing we know about this is that the programming staff at Cannes has seen it, and they loved the movie. And the third thing that we know from inside sources is that the holdup on announcing this film is entirely based on it still needing to pass through Chinese government censors in order to be approved to attend the festival. China's very, very strict on what they allow to represent their country, and we've had multiple times in the past. For example, Zhang Yimou made a film called 1 Second that was pulled from the Berlinale at the very last minute because the film ended up not passing censorship. So in order to not have that happen, they are really, really being sure that it passes that censorship before putting it into the festival. All of this could be nonsense, but I believe the sources I'm getting it from. These rumors are coming from sources who have been right about many other things so far this year. As well, only having 21 competition titles is a bit low. They are able to fit 22 in, and none of the films are exceptionally long, so it's not like we have one 4-hour film that's taking up 2 slots. So what is Resurrection? It's the new film by the 35-year-old art house filmmaker from China, Bi Gan, who's known for his extremely long takes. With his first film, Kaili Blues, that featured a 41-minute long take that went all the way across a town, onto motorbikes, onto boats, basically traversed the entire landscape of a mountainside city. And his second film, Long Day's Journey into Night, featured a 55-minute long take that was also in 3D. The money that was made with Long Day's Journey into Night was funneled directly into this new film, Resurrection, which apparently is a much more ambitious film than his previous movies, which is crazy because his films are so ambitious already. Apparently, this uses a lot of heavy visual effects, so even if the film does play in Cannes, it will not be a finished visual effects cut. We'll be seeing some temp visual effects there. We still don't know whether or not the film will make the lineup, but if it does, this is certain to be one of the most daring, exciting, interesting films at the Cannes Film Festival, or wherever else it ends up premiering. This will be one of my most anticipated movies of the year. Now to talk about the first film actually added to competition, the new film by Iranian filmmaker Saeed Roustai. It's titled Woman and Child, and this is coming after Saeed Roustai's first competition selection in 2022 for his film Layla's Brothers. A bit of an obscure one, because despite getting rave reviews at the Cannes Film Festival, it never received a distributor in North America. And while I didn't love Layla's Brothers, I have been completely enamored by Roustai's previous films, both Life in a Day and Law of Tehran, which are both characterized by their breakneck dialogue, the family drama within, and the criticism of Iran's legal system, specifically in how it pertains to drug addiction. So in Woman and Child, he's working with many of the same actors that he's worked with in his previous films, some for the third or fourth time, and this follows a story of a single mother and her very rebellious child, and the fallout after an accident that surrounds a wedding ceremony. And Saeed Roustai, in my opinion, he is Iran's Aaron Sorkin. His dialogue crackles. It just shoots back and forth so quickly that it can be hard to keep up with the subtitles, but it is electric to watch some of his movies. So I can't wait for this one. And the last addition to the competition lineup, this is a film that I know many, many people out there are very much looking forward to, but I'm a bit skeptical of. And this is Lynn Ramsey's Die My Love, which stars Jennifer Lawrence and Robert Pattinson, telling a story about a new mother who loses her mind in a remote rural home while living with her baby, her husband, and her recently widowed mother-in-law. And she sort of bounces between a psychosis, and she goes from being institutionalized to cheating on her husband and letting her baby play with a knife that she buried in the garden. This is a film about dissociation. It sounds incredibly dark and not really palatable for all audiences. It's very similar in a way, from what I'm gathering, to Lynn Ramsey's other films like Morvern Caller or You Were Never Really Here, which I would describe both as a cinema of dissociation, in which you have a main character who becomes completely detached from reality and indifferent to the world and the events happening around them. Full disclosure, Lynn Ramsey's work has not fully worked for me in the past. I really like Ratcatcher. I think We Need to Talk About Kevin is pretty good, but otherwise, Morvern Caller, You Were Never Really Here, I find far too alienating, which is absolutely the purpose of Lynn Ramsey's cinema, but it's something that I don't typically like. Now, I have heard incredible buzz around Die My Love, which makes me certain this is going to have strong critical response, but it still doesn't sound like a film that appeals to me or to a wider audience in general. In other words, it sounds like the most Lynn Ramsey movie that she has ever made to this point. And I do think that with the current jury makeup that we're looking at, this is a really strong contender for awards at Cannes. Before we get into the other movies, let's talk about the jury and perhaps what we can learn about potential prize winners based on that knowledge. So this year we have Juliette Binoche, the French actress, as the jury president. Now, she is a wonderful performer, and we can gather a little bit about her taste based on the filmmakers that she has chosen to work with in the past, such as Iranian filmmaker Abbas Kiarostami. She's worked with Jean-Luc Godard. She's worked with Krzysztof Kieslowski, Claire Denis. And additionally, when she was the jury president at the Berlinale, she awarded the Golden Bear to Nadav Lapid's film Synonyms. So we can tell a little bit about what she might gravitate towards here, which is potentially more auteur-driven work, maybe slow cinema, something that's not as mainstream appealing. And it's also worth noting, on the jury we have 4 filmmakers, all of whom art house filmmakers. First off, we have Payal Kapadia, known for her art house film All We Imagine Is Light, which won last year's Grand Prix at the festival. We also have Mexican filmmaker Carlos Regadas, who is known for his extremely art house works like Post Tenebras Lux. And we have Hong Sang-soo, the South Korean art house filmmaker who makes, on average, about 2 films a year, and will probably make another one during the festival. And we also have the documentary filmmaker from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Diudo Hamadi, who I'm not overly familiar with. I don't really know his works. I can't say whether or not he is an art house filmmaker, but judging by the rest of the filmmakers here, it seems like his works might go a little bit more into that space as a documentary filmmaker. And also on the jury, we have 3 actors this year. We have Halle Berry, we have Jeremy Strong, and we have Alba Rohrwacher. Now, 2 out of 3 of these jurors, I would say, I am certain have tastes that lean much more to the artsy side. Jeremy Strong takes his work very, very seriously. We've seen his roundtables. We've seen his Actors on Actors where he describes himself as a serious artist. He is going to like the serious artsy films here. And Alba Rohrwacher, she is a regular in the European art film circuit, and the directors that she's worked with and the different cinemas she's worked in say to me that this is someone who really likes that type of cinema, that type of slow filmmaking. Halle Berry is the only one here who might seemingly have more of a mainstream sensibility to her, but she is heavily outnumbered. And then also rounding out the jury, we have Leila Slimani, who is a journalist and an author from France. She's not really in film at all, which is a unique thing that we have as part of this jury. It is really hard to say what her tastes will be. But it's all to say we have a very artsy-leaning jury this year. And just like how last year we could look at and see that they would lean towards the mainstream or the middle brow, having jury picks like Greta Gerwig, J.A. Bayona, Lily Gladstone, Eva Green, Hirokazu Koreeda, Nadine Labaki, Omar Sy, all of those filmmakers, actors, kind of align with that more mainstream sensibility. Their picks, their sensibilities line up with Honora. They line up with Emilia Perez. They line up with The Substance. And this year, I think we can expect more challenging works to win those big prizes. So with that being said, here are my newest standings for the Cannes Palme d'Or. At the moment, I am predicting the new Jafar Panahi film, It Was Just an Accident, to win the Palme. Part of that is because I do feel like Juliette Binoche is very knowledgeable about world cinema. Jafar Panahi, when he was first arrested in 2010, Juliette Binoche was one of the first names to sign the petition to release him. Furthermore, seeing as Juliette Binoche has been the jury president at Berlin, received many prizes from Venice in the past, I think she is probably acutely aware of the fact that Jafar Panahi has both the Golden Lion and the Golden Bear, and he is missing a Golden Palm, which would make him one of the very, very few filmmakers to have a triple crown of the European major film festivals. Is it smart to base a Palm prediction on the narrative of someone completing the trifecta of European film festivals? No. However, I do know that Juliette Binoche really likes Jafar Panahi, and I feel like the rest of this jury will as well. Prize potential for Sound of Falling, for Resurrection if it shows up here, The Mastermind, Sirat, and Die My Love. All of those films have that sort of slow cinema sensibility, that art film sensibility, that heightened highbrow level of sophistication that I think a jury like this is going to go for this year. Moving all the way down to my number 7, now I have Sentimental Value, which for a while was my Palm pick. I still believe this can pick up the screenplay prize, but Joachim Trier does not seem like the type of filmmaker that a jury comprising of Payal Kapadia, Carlos Regadas, Hong Sang-soo, Juliette Binoche, and Jeremy Strong would go for. That's not what I'm getting out of this jury. Screenplay prize, that's what I want to see. But even if it doesn't win anything here, I'm not going to be dissuaded on its chances going further on in the year. I think this is still going to be huge with critics, huge with audiences. This is just potentially not the jury for that film in particular. And now let's move on to all of the other categories. So remember, I am only mentioning the films that stand out that I would seek to get a ticket for at the festival if it fit into my schedule. The first film to talk about is Arco. After last year's Cannes and Annecy breakout animated sensation with Flow, I'm looking at animated films that play both of these festivals with a lot more interest. This year we have a few that are playing both the Annecy competition and at the Cannes Film Festival. We've got A Magnificent Life, the Sylvain Chomet film, and we've got Arco as a big one that I'm looking out for. It's a first feature with a sci-fi setting in the future in which a 10-year-old girl sees a boy falling from the sky wearing a rainbow suit. And upon learning that he's a time traveler, she aspires to help him find his way back home. Visually, from the stills we're seeing at this point, it seems to be inspired a lot by anime, but specifically takes a lot from 70s and 80s Miyazaki, stuff like Future Boy Conan, Castle in the Sky. Even in plot, it sounds a lot like Future Boy Conan and Castle in the Sky. Also, somehow, it seems to be taking a lot of cues from the famed Chilean surrealist filmmaker Alejandro Jodorowsky, and it even stars his granddaughter. I don't know if Arco is going to be this year's Flow, but part of it feels really promising. Then in the premieres category, we have Icelandic filmmaker Hilnir Pálmason's new project called The Love That Remains. Pálmason's last trip to Cannes was with his film Godland in 2022, which played in the Uncertain Regard category and was one of my favorite films to release in 2023. Pálmason's films are gorgeous. They capture Iceland's geography with beautifully flowing camera work. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Bela Tarr or Theodoros Angelopoulos. Interestingly, this film, The Love That Remains, is the first film that he will make that he is actually shooting himself as the cinematographer. While Godland was a period piece which really allowed for the landscapes to shine, The Love That Remains is set in the modern era, and it's about a year in the life of a family going through a divorce. Whether this one will be more in line with his previous work, like Godland and A White White Day, or whether this is going to be a new direction for him, we're yet to see. But regardless, Pálmason is one of the filmmakers that I am most excited to see show up. Added to the Uncertain Regard category, we have Kristen Stewart's directorial debut, The Chronology of Water, which is based on Lydia Yuknavich's memoir, in which she uses swimming as a way to escape from an abusive relationship, and eventually ends up finding freedom within the BDSM community. So this one stars Imogen Poots in the lead role. And something that I find really notable here is the editor, Olivia Nergard Holm, who is a Swedish editor, most known for editing all of Ali Abbasi's films up to this point. The Apprentice, Holy Spider, Border. This could be a really good sign for this one. It's also very notable, this is the third directorial debut by a Hollywood actor in the Uncertain Regard category, joining Eleanor the Great, the Scarlett Johansson movie, and Urchin, the Harris Dickinson directorial debut. That feels like a little bit of oversaturation of Hollywood actors making their directorial debuts in this category, but regardless, I think this is actually the most interesting project of those three, because based on Stewart's taste in films, I mean, she's worked with a lot of great filmmakers over the past 10 years or so since Twilight. She's really the actor turned director that I'm most looking forward to seeing their work. She could be a really great filmmaker in the making. Then, clocking in at only 3 hours, Lav Diaz's new film, Magellan, about the Portuguese explorer. And I say only 3 hours because the Filipino director Lav Diaz, he is very well known for his long films, regularly breaking 4-5 hours. And it's actually rumored that this Magellan project is part one of a 2-part project, and the second film in this project is allegedly 9 hours long. This is certainly one of the most ambitious films at the Cannes Film Festival this year, and it has tons of art house credit to it. Lav Diaz is a Venice Golden Lion winner, and this movie is produced by Albert Serra, who did Pacifiction, Afternoons of Solitude. Could be one of the big films of the festival with critics, although there's no chance in hell this ever breaks out to the mainstream, but critics, they're gonna love this one. Ethan Coen's new movie shows up in the Midnight category, and it's always exciting to see a Coen brother movie show up anywhere, but definitely a little bit less so knowing that it's just half of the duo and knowing that Drive Away Dolls was a bit of a misfire. Honey Don't is in the midnight category, and it follows Margaret Qualley as a small-town PI named Honey who dives deep into a series of murders centered around the local church. And the film was made using the exact same crew as Drive Away Dolls. It's intended to be the second part of a thematic trilogy of lesbian B-movies that Ethan Coen co-wrote and possibly co-directed with his wife Trisha Cook. So your excitement for Honey Don't should be directly tied to what you think about Drive Away Dolls. For me, I felt like Drive Away Dolls had the bones of something really fun, but it missed the landing by sometimes going a little bit too ridiculous. But I'm keeping cautiously optimistic for this one. I'm not expecting this to be a new Coen Brothers classic, but I think it could be a lot of fun. Another animated movie added to the special screenings lineup here is Little Amelie, or the Character of Rain. And this is a French kids movie. And with a trailer recently released, I can say that this looks pretty beautiful. It's got great animation with the character of a storybook to it. And it tells the story of a toddler on the verge of discovering language and discovering the person that she will become in the future, as well as the people that she loves and the things that she's passionate about. I have surprisingly found myself enjoying a lot of the Cannes animated movies, and this feels very much in the vein of last year's Cannes kids movie, Into the Wonderwoods, which I was really shocked at how much I enjoyed it. So, and this one's also playing in competition at Annecy, so it's got the double animated there. I really think this is probably not going to make it outside of France, but it seems really cute. If you like animated films, this is one to watch for. Finally, we have Love on Trial in the premieres lineup, which is from the Japanese director Koji Fukada, whose last film was Love Life, played in Venice in 2022. I didn't see that one, but I heard some good things here and there. The premise of Love on Trial is mostly what interests me here, which follows a J-pop star who is brought to court by her record label after breaking a no relationship clause in her contract, which stipulates that as a musician, she must remain single in order to keep her fans interested. So it sounds like an interesting exploration into personal freedom and the sacrifices of privacy made by people who seek the limelight. That is everything so far in the official selection. It is possible, like Resurrection, there could be more films announced across the board. We're also waiting on screenings on the beach. We're waiting on Cannes Classics. So there are still films to be announced. However, probably nothing that really warrants a part 3 of this video. But continuing on, because there are so many more exciting films to talk about here, we are going to move to the Director's Fortnight, which is my favorite lineup at the festival outside of the main competition. Director's Fortnight, it's up here. Uncertain Regard, sorry, you're down here. They have some of the most unique programming of any festival in the world, putting a spotlight on films that push boundaries and conventions within the art form. And these can be films from directors at any level of their career, but it usually spotlights filmmakers who are right on the verge of breaking out. These films in the Fortnight are independent, genre-defying, cutting-edge movies, and last year I gave 2 10 out of 10s to movies in this category, so I'm certain that this year is going to hold even more gems. First off, I can already vouch for the closing film of the Director's Fortnight, which is Eva Victor's Sundance hit Sorry Baby, a film that I caught digitally during Sundance, in which A24 acquired mid-fest. For a film festival, Sundance did not have many acquisitions of films. Not many people bought films. It was really amazing to see this one snapped up so quickly. A24 clearly believes in it. It's a very adept film in how it balances between the tragic and the humorous, as it tackles the issue of life after sexual assault. And it follows a faculty member at a university who finds her life in a bit of a stasis as she deals with the memories of being assaulted by her thesis advisor when she was a PhD candidate. This got raves at Sundance for good reason. I wouldn't go maybe as far as some of them have gone, but it is a very good film that brings a bit of humor into a tragic situation. Now to the films I haven't seen from Director's Fortnight, which is all but one. Lucky Lou has a very simple premise, basically being a modern-day bicycle thieves set in New York City. It's about an Uber Eats delivery man who has his bike stolen, and he faces the consequences of not being able to hustle in a world where hustling is surviving. So this is the directorial debut of Canadian filmmaker Lloyd Lee Choi, and it's based on his successful short film Same Old, which played in competition at Cannes in 2022 and was named one of the 10 best Canadian short films of 2022 by TIFF. This film's produced produced by Destin Daniel Cretton, and it stars Chang Chen and Fala Chen, and is being shot by cinematographer Norm Lee, who, in my opinion, is one of the best cinematographers in the world right now, but he's barely known outside of Canada. But seriously, his work on the Indigenous film The Body Remembers When the World Broke Open is incredible. That is transcendent cinema. To me, Lucky Liu is my most anticipated in the director's fortnight because everything about this has the potential to be a breakout surprise. It has a great crew, a great cast, a director who has done a lot of short film and commercial work that is very exciting, and it has a simple premise that feels like it could lead to a lot of different places, even just keeping it simple. We also have the new film by Israeli filmmaker Nadav Lapid, Yes. And Yes was heavily speculated to be playing in competition here, especially because Lapid's last film, Ahed's Knee, tied for the jury prize in the 2021 edition of Cannes. Yes is seemingly a satire of Israeli national identity set in the aftermath of October 7th, and it follows a jazz musician who is hired to write the music for a new national anthem. So this seems like it could be a very biting political satire. Lapid has been known for his pretty seething criticism of Israel's government in his films. I mean, his last film, Ahed's Knee, is one of the angriest films that I have ever seen. I love Lapid's work, particularly his Golden Bear winning film Synonyms, which Juliette Binoche awarded the Golden Bear back in 2019. And I also love his Sundance premiering film The Kindergarten Teacher, which was eventually remade in America with Maggie Gyllenhaal in the lead role. Lapid is a hugely exciting filmmaker to see in this lineup and could be one of the highlights of the overall festival at large. This is one that you don't want to miss out on. And of course, you know, I have to rep a Canadian film here, being Death Doesn't Exist. Death Doesn't Exist is seemingly a surrealist animated film with a synopsis that is completely confounding to me. I don't know what this film is going to be, but it describes the aftermath of a failed terrorist attack in which a member of the attacking forces flees into the forest, meeting a doppelganger of herself who leads her to a strange valley. So the premise there, it's not giving me much of anything, but the reason that I'm hyped about this and why I have this so high up my list of excitement is the director, Félix Dufour-Laperrière, who he made a previous documentary animated film called Archipelago, which is criminally underseen. It's an animated documentary about islands in the St. Lawrence River. Blew my mind when I saw it back at Hot Docs when it first came out. Dufour-Laperrière's films harken back to days when Canada was sort of leading the world in terms of animated films and documentary and experimental films. His work is so NFB core, and I love it. And what seems to be one of the most intense and gruesome films in all of the Cannes lineup, Dangerous Animals from director Sean Byrne, the Australian filmmaker best known for his torture porn film The Loved Ones, which I've never seen, but I've heard is fucked up to the max, is a very difficult film to watch. Dangerous Animals is a horror movie set at sea about a bunch of surfers who have been kidnapped and trapped on a serial killer's boat. A serial killer who is obsessed with sharks and intends to chop them up and feed them bit by bit to the sharks. The director's Fortnight description of this film describes it as a complete bloodbath. And honestly, it's always exciting to see true genre cinema showing up at Cannes. Every year, there are a few baffling exclusions from the main competition lineup, and Mirrors number 3 is one of them this year, coming from German filmmaker Christian Petzold, who is a complete master of his craft. He's regularly playing in competition at Berlin, and he's winning prizes, but he has never had a competition slot at Cannes, never mind any other category at the Cannes Film Festival. Genuinely, making a film as amazing as Phoenix back in 2014 should give you a lifelong pass to Cannes' official selection. Petzold's new film follows a piano student in the aftermath of a fatal accident in which her boyfriend is killed, and after which she finds herself taken in by a family of strangers who seem to have something gravely wrong with them. It's an old premise for a thriller, but Christian Petzold, I'm sure, has a unique take on it. We also have Kokuho, which comes from Japanese director Lee Sang-il, who has directed tons of films in the past. I did really want to see his Japanese remake of Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven. So this film is set in post-war Japan. It's about a boy who is born into a Yakuza family who is taken in by a troupe of kabuki actors, which is an interesting premise, and it's from a neat director. But more than anything, the screenwriter of this, Stoke Okudera, prominently wrote the screenplays of many of Mamoru Hosoda's anime films like Wolf Children, The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, and my personal favorite of the bunch, Summer Wars. So the screenwriter here is actually, I think, what interests me the most, because I love Mamoru Hosoda. I want to see what his writer does in live action. To talk about a documentary, because we haven't had many documentaries yet in the lineup, we have Militantropos. And this is a documentary about the war in Ukraine, which takes its title from a word that means the persona adopted by humans in a state of war. And it seems to be a film that looks at war not through the lens of a typical war documentary, but as one that examines how the psyche of war has affected and poisoned everyone impacted by it, becomes all-encompassing, even outside of the context of battle. So maybe this is a potentially unique take on this type of film. It's one that I know I'm really intrigued by. And the final film that I'm going to talk about in the Director's Fortnight category, although there are many more films here, just none that are really catching my eye at this point, we have Enzo, which is the new film by Robin Campillo, who previously was at Cannes with his film BPM, which came very close to winning the Palme d'Or. I believe back in 2017, we had some people fighting for it to win the Palme, but it ended up coming second place. This was originally meant to be directed by Laurent Conté, who died last year. And so Robin Campillo, who is a good friend of Conté's, was brought on to finish the film and direct it himself. And Enzo has been described as quite similar in many ways to Call Me By Your Name, following a 16-year-old boy working as an apprentice for a mason who falls in love with his older Ukrainian colleague. What you can expect from this one apparently is sun-drenched countrysides in France. Two men falling in love here. It's apparently very Call Me By Your Name coded. So if that speaks to you, this is a film for you. But let's move on to Critics Week. Critics Week can be very hit or miss in my opinion. This is a selection of films specifically designed to highlight first and second time filmmakers. On very rare occasions, this lineup ends up producing some of the best films of the year. Think Charlotte Wells' Aftersun, which originated in the Cannes Critic Week lineup. But most years, I have found this lineup to be a bit barren. There's a lot of the time where just nothing of note really emerges from the Critics Week lineup. So let's hope that that is not the case this year and that we get something really juicy out of this. The most notable film screening Critics Week, and potentially going to be one of the hottest tickets at the entire festival, is Shi Ching-su's film Left-Handed Girl, which is notable for being co-written by, as well as produced and edited by, four-time Oscar winner Sean Baker. This is Shi Ching-su's second film after she co-directed the film Takeout with Sean Baker back in 2004. She's basically been working on getting Left-Handed Girl made ever since making Takeout 20 years ago. But in the meantime, Sue has been working as Baker's primary producer on Starlet, Tangerine, The Florida Project, Red Rocket, and the only reason that she didn't produce Enora for him is because she was working on this movie. So tough luck there. It could have been Oscar winner Shi Ching-su, but sadly, no, she was working on Left-Handed Girl instead. And very similarly to Tangerine, they shot this film on an iPhone, and it's set in a night market in Taiwan. So the question we all are asking here is Left-Handed Girl going to capture that Sean Baker magic? Or is there a reason why this took so long to make, to secure funding? Regardless, this is sure to be one of the most anticipated films at the festival for many, many people, because we're seeing Sean Baker here just 1 year after winning the Palme d'Or. Next up is Adam's Interest. This is the second film by Belgian director Laura Wandel, and she's a very interesting filmmaker to me, because she was in Cannes in the Un Certain Regard category a few years ago with Playground, which is one of my favorite recent films films about childhood, entirely filmed as though from the perspective of children. Adam's Interest stars Lea Drucker from Last Summer and Anna Maria Bartolomé from Happening, as well as recently Mickey 17. This is a film about a child who's hospitalized due to malnutrition, possible abuse at home, whose mother simply won't leave his side in the hospital, leading to a very complex moral debate for the nurses. The only thing ringing alarm bells here is going from the Un Certain Regard with your first film of Playground down to Critics Week. Normally we have Critics Week first film, Un Certain Regard second film. To go the opposite way, that is a bit of a red flag, but I'm gonna keep hopeful. Another animated film this year is the Critics Week closing film, Dandelion's Odyssey. This is a French film that tells the story of 4 astronauts escaping from the nuclear annihilation of the Earth to find a new home for humanity. And it seems to be a very surreal film, with the 4 human characters being visually depicted as the seeds of a dandelion floating across space. And it uses a lot of multimedia animation, including apparently time-lapse photography, live-action elements, blended together with 3D animation. It's a very interesting premise. But also, I think this is a very interesting thing. The score for this movie is being done by Nicholas Becker, who is best known for doing the sound design of Sound of Metal, one of the best sounding films I've ever heard. And the last film I'll talk about in the Critics Week lineup is A Useful Ghost. And this is a film from Thailand that sounds like a wonderfully quirky paranormal comedy, sort of in the same vein as What We Do in the Shadows. It's about a recently deceased woman who is concerned about her husband's dust allergy, who returns to his life by possessing the family's vacuum cleaner, cleaning the dust away from the place to keep her husband safe. Eventually, she re-enters into a relationship with him now, even though she is in vacuum form and he is a human. So this sounds very hilarious, really weird, but it's a film I'm on board with. The last category at the Cannes Film Festival is also the smallest and the most indie lineup that you can find at Cannes. This is Acid. These films never have distribution. This is an appeal to independent cinema distributors to pick up these films and release them. Typically what you see here are the most independent and underground of any of the films at Cannes. So if the other lineups are like Sundance, this is like Slamdance. This is the indie alternative to Cannes. Being completely honest, I've seen very few films out of the Acid lineup in the past. The most notable one that I can think of was the absolutely lovely animated film Chicken for Linda, which premiered in this section in 2023. But outside of that, I really can't think of many Acid films that I've seen and have really stuck with me. There's only one film that's really interesting me at the moment, and that is the documentary called Put Your Soul on Your Hand and Walk. This is especially notable as a film for profiling the Palestinian photojournalist Fatima Hosseuna, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike the exact same day that the film was announced to play at the Cannes Film Festival. So the documentary depicts life in Gaza during the genocide, all captured through video calls with Fatima Hosseuna and using her photographs and her experiences bearing witness. So this sounds like a strong, a powerful film, and potentially made even more poignant by the tragic fate of Hosseuna, the main subject of the movie. And that brings us to the end of part 2 of this Cannes lineup breakdown. Just like last time, there are a lot of films to be excited for at this year's festival, and some real gems to be uncovered that I didn't even talk about here. So again, let me know if there's anything that I neglected to mention that you're excited for at this year's film festival. Last time, I had some really helpful commenters letting me know additional information about films like Sons of the Neon Night, Sirat, Fuori, and a few other films, which had me give them a deeper look and has me more excited for all of those movies. And now, with almost the entire lineup revealed, here are my 20 most anticipated films at this year's Cannes Film Festival. Not including Resurrection here, that would definitely be on the list as well, but everything announced so far. But thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned. We have a lot more Cannes coverage coming up on this channel. But until then, thank you so much for watching. My name is Matt, and this has been Fantasy Film Ball.